with the Jewish people. So we know the times of the Gentiles, the trodden down of Jerusalem, is connected with the Jews. Some way God is going to be dealing with them. Jerusalem will be trodden until the times of the Gentiles have been fulfilled. God has given the Gentiles a certain period of time in which to have their authority. But it's going to come to an end. When you think about this, if you really give this thought, it should produce something in you, an expectation and an understanding of what's happening in the world. Because the Bible teaches us that the nations of the world are under God's authority, that He is really the kingdom. When Nebuchadnezzar had his dream about the tree being cut down and so forth, you remember that, and he was driven out into the wilderness with his hair like eagle's feathers and claws along. When he came to his senses, when God gave him his mind back, he said, God rules in the kingdoms of men. Amen. He takes down one and He puts up another. So the people who rule in the earth are permitted by God to rule, whoever they are, even when people we don't like. They're only there because of the permission of God and because of the plan and the purpose of God that He has in the earth. Amen. So when you get upset about who's in charge, don't be upset because God's in charge. Amen. And the so-called person who stands on the earth and say they are in charge, they're submitted to God. And they will only do what God allows for the fulfillment of His eternal purpose and plan. People look at Hitler and said, wow, God let Hitler get in there? Yes, He did. How did that fulfill God's purpose? Well, one of the things that resulted from the Holocaust and Hitler's rule was the formation of certain things in the world politics, as well as something that happened within the Jewish people. Well, they finally came to a decision and understanding that there's no safe place for them in the earth. When your group of people are always cast out of nations, goods are always taken, and then finally you lose 6 million, over half of your population, something rose up in them and said, we need a homeland. They were positioned in the earth. God dealt with the rulers of the earth to mandate that Jews would have a homeland in Palestine. That's all the workings of God. He's in control. So now let's look at Romans 11. Verse 25 says, I don't desire that you be ignorant, brethren, of this mystery. What is a mystery? A mystery is something that you don't understand, correct? Right. It's something that's kept from you. So here's a mystery. You should be wise in your own opinion that blindness in part has happened to Israel. Now, what is he talking about, blindness? Well, you have to read up in the earlier parts where he talks about how God chose a remnant and the others were blinded. The rest of the Jewish nation were blinded. Paul, you're looking at me with concern, so let's go back over here. Verse 7. What then? Israel has not obtained what it seeks, but the elect have attained it, and the rest were blinded. Just as it is written, God has given them a spirit of stupor, eyes that they should not see, ears that they should not hear, to this very day. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a recompense to them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they do not see, and bow down their back always. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Certainly not. But to their fall, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has come to the Gentiles. Now, if their fall is the riches for the world, and their failure of riches for the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles. I magnify my ministry, if by any means I may provoke to jealousy those who are of my flesh, and save some of them. For if their being cast away is the reconciling of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? Okay, now that's a whole lot into that. Now when we get down into verse 25, he said, I don't want you to be ignorant of this mystery. Here's the mystery. Blindness has happened in part until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. So we have in Luke 21 the times of the Gentiles being fulfilled, and over here we have the fullness of the Gentiles become in. Again, there's no real biblical explanation for that I have found, except that what it says, there's something about the fullness of Gentiles coming in to the kingdom. And when that happens, he says, all Israel will be saved. All Israel will be saved. So that implies and suggests and tells me that there's a future for national Israel relationship to God. Okay? So we've looked at the history of the Jewish people as a reason to believe that we are in a period in time that is close to the end. Now, people may say, and I've thought about this myself, people have been talking about the coming of the Lord. You know, every time there's been a great revival, people say the Lord is soon to come. Jesus is coming soon. Jesus is coming soon. And that's been, in some instances, over 100 years ago. Or that Jesus would come at any time. But no, Jesus doesn't come at any time. He comes at a precise time. And not only that, he says to us there's certain things that got to happen before he comes. Okay? One of those things that has to happen is that the Jews have to be in their land. So up until 1948, from the year AD 70 to 1948, close to 2,000 years, Jesus couldn't come. Because the prophecies have to be fulfilled. He says, I'm going to bring them back from wherever they are. From heaven to earth, I'm going to bring them back. That's my promise. If I don't do that, then you can break my covenant with night and day. Now, Jesus also gave us signs that when his coming was near. Let's look in Luke 21 again. Let's look in Luke 21, verse 28. Okay, so in verse 20 to 24, he talks about the destruction of Jerusalem and the dispersion of the Jewish people, right? So now in verse 25, he says, and there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's heart failing them from fear, and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Now, I'm not sure what that means. Powers of the heavens. I don't know what the powers of the heavens are. Maybe you're talking about spiritual forces in the heavenlies. That's as close as I can get to it. But whatever, they're going to be shaken. In some places, he talks about the stars falling from heaven. Now, a star is a big piece of material. If a star hit the earth, it would destroy it. In fact, if a meteor hits the earth, it does damage. In 1908, I believe, a meteor about half the size of a football field came through our atmosphere in Siberia. It destroyed over 8 million trees in a mass area about 100 by 100 square miles. One meteor, half the size of a football field. I'm going to talk about some of that a little later too, because that's very interesting. But right now I'm focusing on this. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. So Jesus is saying some things are going to happen that you can see that will let you know that your redemption is near. Yeah. Then he adds this. He says, he spoke to them a parable. He said, look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they are already budding, you see and know for yourselves that summer is near. So also when you see these things happening, know that the kingdom of God is near. Assuredly I say to this generation will by no means pass away until all things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. So he gives us signs. He said these are signs that let you know that it's near. You won't get the day and the hour, but you can get the season. Look at Mark 13. Verse 24. But in those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened. So he says the tribulation is going to happen. And the moon, and after that, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, stars of heaven will fall, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. He will send his angels and gather together his elect from the four winds, from the farthest part of heaven to the farthest part of earth to the farthest part of heaven. So learn a parable from the fig tree. When its branches already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see these things happening, know that it is near at the door. Okay? So he's saying you can know when it's near. So we need to study eschatology so we can know what's going on and where we stand in relationship to the return of the Lord. Prophecies have to be fulfilled, and prophecies are being fulfilled. I listened to one Bible teacher, and he talks about Donald Trump. What has happened? Well, number one, the Jewish nation was recognized in 1948. But in 2018, Jews will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the nation of Israel. That's significant. When the leading nation on earth, we're supposed to be the head of the nations. We got the largest economy. We got the most freedom. We got biggest guns. Amen. The most influence. Says Jerusalem is the capital, and we're moving our embassy. We're going to build an embassy in Jerusalem to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That's a significant thing. So that's a sign. That's a fulfillment of prophecy. The Bible says, shall a nation be born in a day? And of course we know that Israel was born, the nation of Israel was born in a day. So with all of these things in mind, we need to study eschatology, the teaching or the science of the study of last things, so that we can know where we are, what's going on. Because our expectation is not to be a better job, a bigger house, a more expensive car. That's not what we're waiting for. We are inspired and instructed by scriptures to wait for him. Our focus should be on him. And I see the church at large is not focused on that, because we're like the people in 2 Peter 3. Where is the promise of his coming? Since the fathers fell asleep, things have remained until the day. But notice, keep your eyes open. Keep your ears open. Watch what's going on in the world, because what's going on in the world is going to be an indication of how close we are to the coming of the Lord. Now, there's some people don't believe that Jesus is coming back, but if we believe the Bible, we believe what Jesus said, what the apostle says, everything that we are invested in as a people culminates in Jesus' return. Our whole life is invested in this truth about what Jesus did, who he was, and what it meant. That he is God. He is God incarnate. He came to the earth from heaven. He was before he was. He is the Word that was with God in the beginning. By him all things were created, and without him was nothing made that was made. We need to know these truths. Amen.